For so many years, the Logitech C920 was the king of all webcams in the streaming space. But ever since around about 2020, in the past couple of years, mirrorless cameras have become the norm in terms of webcam use and creating higher quality image for your content. Now, cameras such as the Sony a6000 is probably one of the most popular choices for such a use case. However, what happens when the web game catches up? For the past 3 to 4 years, I've been streaming with two different mirrorless cameras, the Sony a7S and the Sony a7 III. Now, while both cameras are particularly amazing, and especially in the low lighting scenarios such as the a7 III, there's sometimes just not the use case for such a high-end camera needed for streaming, especially in the terms of a Facecam while you're gaming on your screen. This is why I decided to switch up my gaming face camera to a webcam, and the one I particularly chose was the Elgato Facecam. Now, at the time of this video, the price of the camera is actually £150, and it's the exact same in the US at $150. And while this may seem like a bit of a steep price, hear me out. I switched over to this camera, and myself and everyone else that I shown the initial quality of it were just blown away, and I'm talking other streamers and videographers. Now let's quickly go over the specs, because the two main things you're going to want to know is the resolution and the lens. So the highest resolution you can set to this camera sadly is only 1920 by 1080, but it does sit at 60 frames per second. The lens is the equivalent of a full frame 24mm wide lens with an aperture of 2.4. To put this into context, I was already using a 24mm lens with an aperture of 2.8, meaning that the Elgato camera actually allows more light into it. It has a heatsink internally on the device, allowing you to have the ease of mind for doing those extra long streams for overheating, and it actually uses a Sony Stratus CMOS sensor inside, which, as you can see, just works wonders. Another handy feature of this camera is the fact that it has flash memory, meaning that if you save the settings on one computer, plug it out, put it into another computer, your previous settings are still there for you. For me, this is extremely handy as I switch between a Mac Mini and a Windows machine for work, and being able to flick over from one machine to the other without having to think about it saves a lot of hassle. The connection is a high-speed USB Type-C, and the camera actually comes with a cover for the lens and a clip mount to be placed on top of the monitor. The software too is extremely easy to use, but before we get into the settings, if like me you were having some issues with OBS initially, what you want to do is you want to hold down Control and then click on this settings icon and then select isochronous in your USB transfer mode. This seems to iron out any issues I was having previously within OBS. Following on, you're able to choose the zoom image levels of your camera. If you're not needing to be a full 1920 by 1080, you can zoom in a little bit, and if your camera isn't full screen on your gaming scene, you can at least not worry about the loss of quality on that one. Your first set of custom options is your picture options, in which you can customize your contrast, saturation and sharpness, if there's any need for that with this camera. And then afterwards, you're able then to go and control the exposure levels, camera shutter speed and the ISO. And something else that is called compensation, which I can only guess is similar to flash compensation. Next up is the white balance. This is an extremely handy thing to configure, because say for example if you have an Elgato key light at a specific temperature, you can then match this with your camera, allowing your skin tones to be as accurate as they can, as well as the overall image quality as well. And finally, there is noise reduction. If you're in an extremely low light scenario, the camera does pick up on a little bit of noise, so being able to control this is extremely handy. Another cool feature of this camera is the ability to green screen yourself in the actual software. However, I do want to add that this is only possible on more recent graphics cards. Basically, we're talking about NVIDIA RTX 20 series, and you have to have their broadcast software installed with it. Sadly, my streaming PC is only a GTX 1660 Super, so I couldn't try this feature out for myself. Overall, this camera has been an extremely handy replacement to my DSLR that I was using solely just for a Facecam, and I think there's less pressure on thinking about if the lens is okay, if it's in focus, there's too much noise that basically mirrorless cameras bring into the picture. So if you're maybe thinking about slimming down your setup or upgrading your current webcam, I can only highly recommend the Facecam by Elgato. It's just absolutely freaking amazing to use. But anyways guys, thanks very much for watching the video. If you like what you see here today, don't forget to hit that like button. If you want to see more videos like this in the future, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. But until then, I'll catch you in the next one. I'll see you.